what is the role of the diaspora in economic development? The role of the diaspora is in Eritrea, especially in Eritrea, but there are also other small countries that heavily rely on the contribution of the diaspora. What kind of contributions can the diaspora play? Theoretically, transfer of capital, transfer of knowledge, transfer of values, transfer of social networks, which are quite vital for a country that is trying to get on its feet. So the diaspora can play a very important role. And then the question that arose to start with was, how many people are we talking about? How many people are in the diaspora? The honest answer is nobody knows. But it is a substantial proportion of the Eritrean population. And the guess estimate we came with was about 30% of the Eritrean population, including those in Sudan, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and elsewhere. Huh?
How many is left in Eritrea, according to that number?
70%.
Yeah. How many absolute?
Is it a math? Can I use my mobile now?
No, stop. What are you saying?
30% of what?
Of the whatever population it is.
What is the population?
5 million, 3 million.
No.
How many are they?
No.
6 million?
The demographics, we have the statistics says it is between 2 and 2.5.
No. That's rubbish.
That's the statistics.
Okay.
The CIA factbook says.
Anyway, can we please, Shetil, we need to keep quiet. We don't know how many they are. How many people live in Eritrea? Do you know? Does anyone know?
Keep quiet, so we follow.
Yeah, if you're coming here to, please.
Yeah.
So, of whatever number of people live in Eritrea, about 30% are in the diaspora. Whether that is right or wrong, I don't know. But that's what we thought the right figure is. It may not be the case. If there is anyone who knows better, please help us.
20% according to the CIA factbook.
Okay, let him finish, please.
Okay,
Let him finish his summary.
Okay,
Then we can talk.
Mobratu is saying about 20%. It's possible. We are simply guessing. We don't know.
Gaim
And then
just,
the other question that was raised was, what happens to the 2% tax? Some people said it should be continued because it plays an important role, but it has to be democratized. If the contributors know exactly what it is used for, and Eritrea being capital deficient, likely to be capital deficient, I think they say it can play a positive role. But opinions were divided. There were also others who say it should be voluntary. It should be voluntary. We didn't resolve that, and it's not possible to resolve it anyway. The other issue we raised was the role of the diaspora in, people said whether the diaspora will play a positive role or not will depend very much on the regime type. It's a function of a regime type. If the regime is democratic, welcoming, then the Eritrean diaspora is likely to respond positively and play a positive role. But if the regime is not welcoming and it puts restrictions in place, then the diaspora may stay where it is. So the type of regime we're going to have in post-SIS era is very important, and the diaspora is likely to respond positively or negatively depending on the regime type. But if we assume there is a regime that is welcoming, and some suggested it should learn from the Ethiopian experience, where there are certain privileges enjoyed by the returnee diaspora, then the Eritrean diaspora could also play an important role in terms of transfer of knowledge, transfer of capital, transfer of social networks. They can really play a vital role. And it was said, I don't know who said that earlier, Eritrea has more people in the diaspora than any other country in the world. I don't know if that is true, but if it is, Per capita. Okay. Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, it can't be anything else. Yeah. So, given the high proportion of the Eritrean population in exile, if the conditions are promising and inviting, people were hoping that the diaspora would play an important role. The idea of Eritreans voting with their feet to return to Eritrea on the next day is a myth. It's not going to happen. And it's very unlikely that many of the Eritrean diaspora will return for good. It will all depend on their individual circumstances. But given our past history, the Eritrean diaspora played a key role during the liberation struggle. But that link is probably lost because of the 25 years in between, which was a very bad experience for all of us. And then people talked about the need to develop mechanisms that would help the state to incorporate, to tap into the resource, the diaspora resource. And we didn't say what type of mechanism, but some people said Ethiopia, the people can learn from the Ethiopian experience. And then the next issue which we discussed was the PFDJ firms.
We need to be brief now.
Oh, okay. What would happen to the PFDJ firms? The PFDJ plays a dominant role in the Eritrean economy. Of course, most of them are inefficiently managed by former ex-combatants. But what happens? Should they be nationalized or privatized? The general consensus we reached was that they should be nationalized in the first stage and probably later privatized. But in the beginning, they should be privatized. And then the question of multinational corporations, if they exist in Eritrea, what should happen to them? Of course, they should be encouraged to carry on. Nothing will happen to them if the type of Eritrea we envisage is in place. Future relationship between Ethiopia and the Egad countries. I think David has addressed this in his talk, and but one important issue which was raised was that you remember when we were growing up, even when we were adults, the situation in Tigray and Eritrea, the major supply of labor came from Eritrea because Eritrea were more advanced relatively, but now the reality is reversed. Tigray seems to be more advanced, more industrialized, and that situation has changed, and that has to be taken into account. So if we have the economies of the two countries, especially Tigray and Eritrea, existing in harmony, they could supplement each other. I mean, the comparative advantage in Tigray, in Eritrea may be different, but both regions could benefit, countries could benefit from it. I think I will stop here.
Thank you.